Venezuela, UN officials began detouring the community of Las Tejerias affected by rains. Peru's President Pedro Castillo reiterated that the accusations for the prosecutor's office that could cost him his job is part of a coup d'etat. On a Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that he doesn't seek to destroy Ukraine during a summit in Kazakhstan. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Venezuela, UN officials began a tour of the community of Las Tejerias affected by rains. Meanwhile, the government continues to lead the recovery, search and rescue efforts. The delegation made up of representatives of UNICEF, UNHCR, PAHO and OSHA toured the site of the tragedy accompanied by Vice President Delcy Rodriguez and other government authorities. The delegates highlighted the willingness of the multilateral organization to support the recovery, search and rescue efforts. In this regard, Minister Mijo Ceballos gave details on the latest results on the search and rescue operations in the area. The Attorney General of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, informed that a public ministry has indicated so far this year 533 public officials and 20 collaborators for human rights violations. From the headquarters of the public ministry in the city of Caracas, the Attorney General highlighted these figures speaks for itself of the efforts and the decade of the public ministry and auxiliary organs of justice to punish these unfortunate cases. He emphasized that during 2022, 388 officials and 34 civilian collaborators have been charged for a total of 432 accused, which is also the highest figure since his arrival at the public ministry. Finally, he congratulated the actions of the attorneys, the work of the auxiliary office bodies, and the judiciary for defending the human rights of Venezuelans.
This is the highest figure since the year 2017 if we compare it year by year. That is to say, it is the highest compared to 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020 and 2022. It far exceeds and even doubles several of these years.
In Argentina, environmental, social, political, and trade union organizations mobilized this Friday in front of the International Monetary Fund offices in Buenos Aires, demanding the cancellation of illegitimate financial debts imposed on the Global South. The demonstrators mobilized under the slogan, "The debt is with the people and with nature." These mobilizations conclude with the annual summit between the IMF and the World Bank to be held this Friday in Washington, U.S. Meanwhile, a new United Nations development report warns that 54 countries, which represents more than half of the world's poorest population, need immediate debt relief to avoid extreme poverty. In Brazil, a poll revealed that the candidate of the Workers' Party, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, held a point a little over his opponent, current President Jair Bolsonaro, in the runoff elections. The Queres Institute of Brazil published results of its latest poll and stated that leaders of the Workers' Party, Lula da Silva, has 49% of the voting intentions, while Bolsonaro obtained 41%. The director of the institute, Felipe Nunes, points out that the valid votes are taken into account and stated that obtaining these results, they use for the first time the concept of a probable voter than 200 voters were intervened between October the 10th and 22nd with a margin of error of 2 points. Peru's President Pedro Castillo reiterated that the accusations by the prosecutor's office that could cost him his job is part of a coup d'etat and again reject accusations that he leads a criminal organization in his government. Castillo described the constitutional complaint presented to Congress against him by Patricia Benavides, Attorney General of the nation, as a mistake that is still time to be rectified. The thesis of this prosecution is that the president leads a corruption network of money laundering and a concession of public work contracts, and that it is integrated by his family and political entourage. Since his arrival to power, he has lived under the siege of prosecution and the siege of a Congress dominated by the right wing that demand his resignation and has already tried to remove him from office in 2 occasions. The president, a rural teacher like his wife, denied that his family has committed crimes and said he is the victim of the campaign to remove him from power. We'll take a short break now, but first you can now follow us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. During a press conference following a summit in Kazakhstan, Russian President Vladimir Putin says that he doesn't seek to destroy Ukraine.
We haven't set ourselves to the task of destroying Ukraine. They cut the water supply to the Crimean Peninsula, where 2.5 million people live. Troops had to move in and open the water supply. This is an example of our logic. If the first action hadn't occurred, there wouldn't have a need for a counteraction. We'll have to think twice now, after the Crimean bridge has been damaged, how important it is for Russia to ensure communication with Crimea by land.
Also, Russian President Vladimir Putin insists that Russia has no plans to expand mobilizations in Russia following last month's partial mobilization, which should call up military reservists to fight in Ukraine.
Nothing further is being planned. The Defense Ministry has not come to me with any further suggestions, and I see no need for it in the future.
When the Russian president was approached about a possible participation of Russia in the next G20 summit, this was his statement.
The issue of my visit to the G20 meeting in Indonesia has not been finally decided yet. Russia will certainly take part in this work. In what format? We are still thinking about it. And for now, there is no question of direct negotiations with any of the G20 members.
In the United Kingdom, the pound sterling depreciated this Friday after the foreign minister Qasim Khartoum announced his resignation. On his Twitter account, Khartoum published a farewell letter where he confirmed that the country's Prime Minister Liz Truss asked him to resign as Foreign Minister, and he took her at her word. The former finance minister acknowledged that the economic environment challenges he's presented his economic plan on September 23rd, which includes a drastic tax cut, and that a medium-term fiscal plan is crucial to demonstrate his government's commitment to fiscal discipline. Following Khartoum's resignation, former Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hano will take over the finance portfolio. Environmental protesters threw tomato soup over Vincent van Gogh's famous painting Some Flowers at the National Gallery in London, demanding that this British government put a stop to new oil and gas extraction projects. They were the 2 activists from civil disobedient group Just Stop Oil, who are calling to stop all new hydrocarbon exploitation projects in the country. After throwing the suit, they kneel in front of the paint and glue themselves to the museum wall. Painted in 1888 by the Dutch imprisoners mastered the painting protected by glass is valued at over $84 million. The museum said shortly afterward that the frame suffered minor damages, but that the painting was intact. Police stated the activists were arrested for the criminal damage and aggravated trespassing. And these new actions follow 2 weeks of protests by the group in the capital against the oil drilling. French unions announced a tentative payment agreement with a giant Total Energies on Friday following emergency negotiations to end a 3-week strike that has emptied the country's petrol station. The General Confederation of the Labor Union, which initiated the industrial actions, will out a meeting and vowed to continue striking. Under pressure from the government to resolve the 18-day crisis, the old government met with 4 unions at its headquarters in Paris.
If the employees take their destiny, their work, into their own hands, then yes, we will win on wage, on employment, on working conditions, and on what we want to implement today, but also from the 18th of October by extending and amplifying the strike in all sectors of the economy.
And we have more news coming up after this financial break, so don't go away. Welcome back. According to the head of the IMF's African Department, Sub-Saharan Africa is facing its most challenging environment in years, with the region's pandemic recovery interrupted by rising inflation, rising interest rate, and the global slowdown. Food and fuel prices have increased the cost of living, which has hit Sub-Saharan Africa particularly hard, as a large portion of the region's income is spent on food.
There is, if you will, some slowdown in growth, but even more problematic, even more harmful, of course, is the effect that the global shocks have had on things like the price of food, the price of fuel, which have all raised the cost of living. And given such a high share of income in the region goes towards food, this has been a really big source of dislocation. I think a really very important priority for governments across the region is to make sure that this food insecurity challenge is addressed head on. So I think a lot of emphasis on economic policy and allocation of resources towards making sure that food security is addressed is the #1 priority that we see at the moment. And then second, the drivers of cost inflation, have to be tackled.
About 6.7 million families are expected to face high levels of acute food insecurity, were the Food and Agricultural Organization FAO representative in Somalia.
The current drought is the worst that we have seen in the last 4 decades. It has affected about 7.8 million people. So that just put things in perspective, this is about half of Somalia's population. 90% of the country is facing extreme drought. Women and girls are being forced to trek much longer distances to access water, shelter, which also makes them more vulnerable to gender-based violence. Of course, we should not wait for a famine declaration to act, because then it will be too late. We know from 2011, when we faced a famine situation and a famine declaration, that by the time the famine was declared, half of the 260,000 people who died had actually already died.
In Egypt, the leader of Arab state expressed its solidarity with Saudi Arabia after Washington's accusations against Riyadh. In a statement, the bloc supported Saudi position of non-passing the reduction of oil production agreed by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries. The Secretary General of the League of Arab States said Washington's remarks are not based on facts, but on politicizing economic decisions necessary to achieve stability in the world economy. Meanwhile, the White House National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications said that reduction in Saudi Arabia's oil production supports Russia economically and morally, while pointing out that Riyadh pressures other members of OPEC Plus to support the decision. Supporters of the Palestinian Hamas movement demonstrated in Hebron in Palestine to protest the increased persecution and repression by Israeli occupation forces. The expanded Israeli military operation in the Palestinian territories are registering multiple clashes daily. The Israeli daily Riyadh Aramnad revealed that the occupation army mobilized 10 reserve companies in response to the tense situation in Jerusalem, while Hamas called on Friday to continue its persistence and heroism with all means. Israel has occupied Palestine since the 1967 Six-Day War, conducting heavy cleaning and colonization tactics against the Palestinian people. And with that story, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.